Thank you, David. It's a delight to be back. The 2010 election proceeds at a grim time for our country and for our state. Americans and Californians are enduring the most savage recession since the Second World War. This recession was incubated by bad government policy. Bad policy on credit, bad policy on regulation, and especially here in California, by bad policy on government spending. Now, a crisis brought on by bad government is being used to foist even more government upon us, the biggest expansion of government since the New Deal. As government muscles into areas that really are not its job, it neglects what is its supreme job, national security. The Rand Corporation reports that there have been more terrorist attempts in the United States soil in 2009 than in any year since 2001 itself. President Obama is now winding down the war in Iraq, a war that was separately authorized by Congress in 2002. The President has approved his own surge in Afghanistan, and he is right to do so. As a member of the United States Senate, I would vote to ensure that the President and our forces in Afghanistan have all the resources they require to accomplish this mission. But he and we have a third war on our hands, a war against al-Qaeda and other terrorists around the planet. In the course of that war, our forces have captured enemy combatants, and debate has raged over how these detainees are to be treated. The Supreme Court has ruled that terrorist detainees are entitled to a hearing regarding whether they are, in fact, associated with such a terrorist group, a group that is essentially at war with America. But the court has not ruled that any other rights we commonly apply to civilian trials are necessary. Yet the Obama administration has proposed to organize a full federal court civilian trial for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in Lower Manhattan. New York authorities estimate that the cost of providing security for this trial is $200 million for the first year alone. It's only slightly less than what New York annually spends for its parks and libraries combined. The Obama administration's approach on this subject is not only costly and risky, it's legally and strategically ill-conceived. The harm from applying civilian court principles to the enemy combatants in the war on terror has already been seen. Out of fear of violating our constitutional principles that were developed in the civilian context, our country has already released many from Guantanamo, two of whom are now battle commanders in Afghanistan, again fighting our troops. It's almost absurd that we allowed that to happen. The lasting elements of alliance are a common commitment to democratic principles and human rights. We have such shared commitments with the countries of NATO, with our Pacific Ocean allies like Australia, South Korea, and Japan, and with Israel. And we're not free of faults, and neither are they, but we recognize that Israel, like these other allies, is a functioning democracy that tolerates a wide breadth of opinion, not permitted in any of the nations arrayed against her. We call this out, and we refuse to be intimidated into silence or into compliance. If a country or a group of countries requires that America boycott another country as a condition of normal relations with them, we will refuse. On that basis, America has passed and rightly enforces the anti-boycott legislation, making it unlawful for an American company to comply with the demand of certain Arab states that companies boycott Israel if they wish to do business with them. Tonight, I'd like to address two other areas of high concern: trade with China and the crisis in Mexico. Just as I've been a civil libertarian throughout my career, so I have been a free trader, and a free trader I remain. But like our liberties, our trade is governed by law. Free trade does not mean that we should allow foreign countries to sell us lead-painted toys or poisoned pet foods. There are rules of trade, and the first rule is this: if we open our market to you, you must open your market to us. These rules were written 25 years after World War II, during that period of time, 25 years after World War II. This was an era when exchange rates were fixed. The dollar brought the same number of francs or marks or yen on Tuesday as it did on a Monday. and the same again next week, next month, next year. In those days, a country could not unilaterally manipulate its currency to gain an advantage for its exports and to create more jobs at home at the expense of its trading partners. And while some currencies were set low against the dollar, that was by design, to help Reconstruction after the Second World War. Today, however, we see something that would never have been imagined back then. China has manipulated its currency year after year with a deliberate intention to shift jobs from our country to theirs. By one serious estimate, 1.4 million United States jobs are missing as a result. It is an artifact of a time when America was so dominant in world production and world trade that we essentially offered a playing field tipped in favor of other countries to help them recover from World War II. This cannot continue. For the sake of our state and our export trade, it cannot continue. For the sake of California and the United States, it cannot continue. We need to get tougher. President Eisenhower is reputed to have said, "There is nobody on earth who can make more trouble than a United States senator." As a former congressman with a strong free trade record, I'll be in a position as a United States senator to push toward a rule of reciprocity as future trade rounds allow. As a California senator, I'll also have a special concern for the crisis of violence on our southern border. 6,500 people were killed last year in Mexico's drug violence. Almost 300 are believed to have been killed just in the first 10 days of this year. Mexico's gangland violence is already reaching into our cities. Our foreign aid assistance to training and equipping police is nowhere more needed than with our friends in Mexico. Taking the steps long necessary to make our border less porous will help immensely with drug traffic and potential terror infiltration as well. One reason that San Diego has gone relatively unscathed by the drug violence that has reached into the Texas border town of El Paso is the immigration fence that we have across the border with Tijuana. Under these circumstances, President Obama's proposals to revive an immigration amnesty plan are reckless. The President knows that such a plan cannot pass Congress. His musings on the subject invite a renewed rush of migration from Mexico to take advantage of this offer. With California's unemployment rate at 12.5%, this migration could not be worse timed. And in getting serious about the border, we also need to recognize that legal immigration by those who follow our country's rules is now and has always been a net benefit to our country. For 9 years, I represented Silicon Valley in Congress. Silicon Valley would never have existed without the legal immigrants who came to our state, who came to our country from every country on earth to study, to invent, to stay, and to make our country better. The answer to illegal immigration is border enforcement, a physical barrier, adequate personnel, very serious fines on employers who break the law every bit as much as those whom they hire, and legal immigration for the benefit of both sides of the employment relationship. I've been privileged to travel to more than 20 sub-Saharan countries as a congressman, and particularly as a member of the Subcommittee on Africa of the House International Relations Committee. In every one of these personal observations, and in hundreds more, I saw America through the eyes of the millions in the poorest parts of the world. I did not see anger or resentment. I did not hear argument or the rehearsed repetition of slogans. I saw America in the way that it is really viewed, as a land of freedom and hope and promise. We were admired, not because we are wealthy, but because we are free. I'd summarize all these experiences in one phrase: a commitment to freedom. We stand for freedom. We stand with our allies who grant freedom to their citizens. We stand for freedom of expression, freedom of trade, freedom of conscience, freedom of fear from terrorist attack, either in our country or upon our allies in the Middle East, Europe, Africa, Asia, or the Americas. The rest of the world will once again know America for its unswerving stand for freedom, as it did when President Ronald Reagan and President Harry Truman from two different parties, but both patriots, stood up to the greatest modern threat to freedom, the Soviet Empire, and with determination and patience achieved for our generation what we must now achieve and pass along to the generation that follows us. In conclusion, I want to thank the World Affairs Council for inviting me to appear here tonight. I was privileged, as you heard from David, to be chairman of this organization for 2 years and to know firsthand the remarkable work that the World Affairs Council accomplishes, particularly in educating younger Americans in international affairs. And let me thank so many who are here tonight who have welcomed me back to the Bay Area. Though my wife Suzanne and I now live in Irvine, we treasure our friends in Northern California, and we treasure its great universities. Go Bears. And the World Affairs Council especially. I'd now be delighted to hear your suggestions, your comments, and do my best to respond. Thank you very much.